Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your destination for diving deep into the universe of Bitcoin. Today, we're joined by Kristine Cranley, an expert blending the world of private equity investment, Bitcoin mining, and education. With her unique focus on leveraging stranded natural gas for Bitcoin mining and her passion for Bitcoin education, we're in for an illuminating conversation today. Welcome, Kristine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Likewise, likewise. So, Christine, we could kick things off by could you explain the concept of using stranded natural gas for Bitcoin mining and its significance in today's energy landscape?
Absolutely. So, one of the most beautiful things about Bitcoin mining is the fact that it's location agnostic means it can go anywhere in the world and soak up wasted energy resources. So it acts like a sponge to go out there and connect places and communities that aren't necessarily connected. So with Bitcoin mining, the big trick is to find the cheapest and most stranded energy resource. So when an oil field is drilling for oil, natural gas is a byproduct of the drilling. And if you don't have infrastructure built out that direction to the oil field, like let's say a pipeline coming out that way, then there's nothing that you can do with it. It's wasted. You can't really, there's no market for it. So if you don't do anything to mitigate that, then it's vented, which is just kind of leaked into the air, and that's not great for the environment. And so when you travel, like let's say a place like West Texas, where we have a lot of stranded gas, you see those big flames, flares. So they burn it and they waste it. So Bitcoin mining with stranded energy is when we take a data box and ASIC computers and we bring it out to the wellhead and we capture that stranded wasted gas by taking a generator and turning it into power and mining Bitcoin with it.
Nice, nice. That was a really concise way of explaining it. I've had other Bitcoin miners on the show, and they've been like this big, convoluted, complex concept about Bitcoin mining and natural gas. So thank you for giving that in such a concise and quick summary. So, Christine, what led you to the intersection of private equity investments and Bitcoin mining? I know we don't really want to get into high level financial jargon or knowledge, but do you see these two worlds kind of symbolically kind of growing together?
Absolutely. So my journey is kind of unique. I started off in the nonprofit world, just serving underprivileged women actually that found themselves in a crisis pregnancy and helping them pick themselves up out of their situation and obtain financial security. And so I've always kind of had a heart for justice and helping bring financial stability and flourishing to all people. But in the pandemic, I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, so to speak, and I started learning about sound money and just the broader macroeconomic situation. So I moved to Texas in 2021 and started an education, basically an LLC, where I would just educate anyone who wanted to listen about what is Bitcoin, how do you get into it, what's a wallet, that kind of thing. And along the way, I got picked up by a registered investment advisor, one of the only ones in Texas that was actually allowing Bitcoin exposure for their clients, obviously amongst a much broader portfolio and in consideration of the risk tolerance of those clients. And so I ended up getting my financial license and joining the RIA firm. So we as a firm and me personally, I'm invested in Bitcoin myself as well as Bitcoin mining. So I've done a lot of education with our investors about the investment thesis of Bitcoin. What are the risks? What are the rewards? What to know, how to judge it as an investment based on your situation, your risk tolerance. But along the way, we also started offering for our accredited investors the opportunity to invest in these stranded natural gas opportunities because we found it to be one of the most economic ways to invest in the actual infrastructure. And so to answer your question, I've been really surprised and really just enjoyed the journey of coming alongside investors, potential investors, and just educating them on the infrastructure, the opportunity here. And there's a lot of interest. Sometimes people want exposure to the actual asset. So we have had opportunities where we're mining Bitcoin and distributing the pro rata share. But there's also opportunities involving hosting. So we build out the infrastructure, and it basically becomes an energy arbitrage where we're providing the infrastructure at a certain kilowatt cents per kilowatt hour, but then miners are the ones that come in and invest in that space. And so then we're able to pass back to our investors the difference between, what we're building out the space at and then what we're making on that hosting investment. So taking a step back just at traditional finance and the Bitcoin world, I know a lot of Bitcoiners just like the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized. There's not the intermediaries, but there's a lot of interest out there for help in getting into this space, and some people don't. They do want the trusted institutions to help them, broker access, which I think is why there's a lot of people that are very interested in the ETF. To be able to bring the traditional world into exposure with the asset and thereby teaching them about it.
Hey there, fellow Bitcoin enthusiasts. We just wanted to take a moment to appreciate you for tuning in to the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Your support means the world to us as we dive into the exciting world of Bitcoin, blockchain, and all things cryptocurrency. If you've been enjoying our content, don't forget to hit that like button. It's like a virtual high five that keeps us motivated. And hey, sharing is caring. If you know someone who'd geek out over Bitcoin as much as we do, hit that share button. Finally, if you want to stay up to date with all our latest episodes and insights, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single update. Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep exploring, and remember, the future is decentralized. Now back to the episode.
Yes, and speaking of the ETF and regulation, I know that um, you know you have really been instrumental in kind of telling people about the environmental impacts of Bitcoin, and we've seen this increased scrutiny on the impact that Bitcoin purportedly can have, or Bitcoin mining can purportedly have on the environment. How do projects utilizing that stranded energy address some of those concerns?
The nice thing about the stranded energy is it's a great story to tell because, as you say, there is a lot of concern about environmental impact. And however you feel about that, renewables versus oil and gas, and nuclear, even the truth is that the renewables don't have the capacity to keep the grid on because they're not what we call dispatchable load. So there's a lot of power when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining if you've got wind and solar. But then when the sun is down and the wind's not blowing, there's not the power that you need. And we see that particularly heightened, let's say in a storm, where it's colder than usual and you're using more power. So we are going to have the oil and gas with us for a while, but obviously there's this concern about the methane that may leak into the environment with the gas. So what's happening with Bitcoin mining is we're actually taking, if the gas is flared, then it only captures about 91% of that methane. And so it's still leaking into the environment, and methane is much more warming, has a much more warming effect on the environment than, say, carbon would. And so the nice thing about the stranded gas mining is you are completely mitigating that flaring impact by transforming all of it into power. So in a sense, you could say Bitcoin is cleaning up the environment by taking it and turning it into digital monetary energy.
And could you tell us about Noah's Bitcoin? Because I feel a lot of people, like you've done so many things in the space, and Noah's Bitcoin was something that caught my eye. So I'd love for you to elaborate on your mission with that.
Absolutely. And it's been a while since I've done much with it because now that I'm more in the financial space, we've been working hard there. But originally the idea was there's a lot of monetary expansion happening. And so back in 2021, when I first founded it, I was very concerned about the flood of inflation that I felt was coming, right? And so that was kind of the idea of inflation like a flood. And is there a way that you can hedge your portfolio to rise up as inflation rises up? Because we know in the past, or whenever there's monetary expansion, so money, there's more liquidity added to the system, it's the assets that grow in value. And so, as I mentioned, I started off serving the underprivileged, and they don't have the capacity to, let's say, invest in desirable real estate or even housing sometimes. And so the fact that Bitcoin was an asset that you could invest in a little bit at a time, that would potentially have the power to hedge as inflation rose and asset values increased, that you'd be able to ride that. Now, obviously, with the disclaimers, we all know, we've been in the space for a while, Bitcoin's very volatile. You never want to put next month's rent money in it. When it's going up, it's electric. Like just last night, it was shooting up, and that's so exciting, but it can just as easily go down. So also wanting to be able to walk with people and help them understand just the way to do it well, which in my opinion is to dollar cost average, right? Just don't even try to time the market. Don't put in more than you can handle, but just kind of slowly buying in, and then having it grow as your little nest egg. And so that you're, during the times of bear market, which can be long and hard, as we've all discovered, you're still doing okay because you haven't overinvested, but you also have that potential to be able to rise up with the flood of inflation and have an asset that can protect some of that life savings that you've put into it.
Yes. And, with that note on dollar cost averaging, like, are you excited about like these different investment related entities that's coming out for Bitcoin, such as like the ETF stuff? You're seeing like a lot of new digital wallets coming out, and of course the price is going up now. So we've been in it for a couple cycles now, so we've kind of seen the ebb and flow of how this goes. And I've always found that when the price shoots up, you have all these people coming out of the woodwork. They're Bitcoin experts. They're telling you to invest in this, invest in
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
like, you being like an investment professional, like, what's your thoughts on some of these new um, things that are coming out, or financial instruments that are coming out based on Bitcoin?
Well, I think it's a great question. Um, Obviously, having been in the Bitcoin space even longer than I've been in the financial space, I have a great heart for helping people understand how to take possession of their Bitcoin themselves so that they don't have to pay any institution to hold it. And then you don't have the same counterparty risk that you might if um, right in the traditional system, if let's say a bank were to go down, or so always I encourage people, if you can, learn about taking possession, maybe looking at a multi-signature option where you have one key at one place and then another in another place to kind of offset the risk of losing that investment. So for that reason, just me personally, I'm not as interested in the ETF, which would be, it would be backed one to one, but it wouldn't be the same. You'd never be able to take those coins into your own possession or to spend them, let's say, if there's situations where you're able to use Bitcoin. But from a broader perspective, there are a lot of investors that are very interested in this space and would like to be in it, but they are not interested at all in taking those coins into their own possession or taking the risk. And I think that's where the beauty of having access to it for other capital is going to be good for the space. I think in that people are going to, it gives it more credibility, I think, for a lot of investors. Because right now the Bitcoin market cap is extremely small. It's like half a trillion, and gold is 10 trillion, and treasuries are 303 trillion, I think the last time I checked. So there's a lot of room to grow for this asset. And I think a lot of people are really waiting on bated breath, rightly or wrongly, for this ETF approval to say, okay, well, it's not going away. If they've approved an ETF for it, it's not going away. So maybe I will think about allocating a little of my portfolio to it.
Which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Okay, what's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right? Right? There's no second best, okay? But take all your money, buy Bitcoin, then take all your time, figure out how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin, then take all your time and figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And if you absolutely love the thing that you don't want to sell it, go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it. And if you've got a business that you love because your family works for the business, it's in your family for 37 years, and you can't bear to sell it, mortgage it, finance it, and convert the proceeds into the hardest money on earth, which is Bitcoin.
This channel is for education purposes only and is not affiliated with any financial institution. This is not financial advice. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now back to the episode.
Yes, and the regulatory landscape for Bitcoin is like this hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate and stay ahead of these potential regulatory changes, especially when dealing with like private equity investments in Bitcoin mining?
It's really important to be listening to what the SEC is saying and doing everything we can to become compliant with that if you are going to try to bridge the space. And from what I know, they're very interested in just learning, like, how is this being done? And so, we get checked up on, and we're happy to show them everything that we've got and to say, look, if you want us to change anything, you just let us know. And that's what you have to do if you're going to kind of play in their world. I think there's a lot of people that are kind of dismayed that we haven't had more clarity already. But one of the things that I always point out to people is the SEC has said Bitcoin is decentralized. And so we consider it more like a commodity. There's nobody that you can call up and say, look, you're not in compliance. You need to fix your system because, Satoshi's gone and, nobody controls the network that much. But everything else, they have been very clear that they think of it in the category of securities. And so a security would be something that is run by a team. It's made or broken by a team. And so because of that, there needs to be a lot of transparency. If someone's going to invest in something that's a security, they need to know who the team is, what the financials are. Does one small group of people own a large percentage such that they can just dump their bags on everybody else at a time when the market's up and manipulate the price that way? And so just as in the financial space, as working at a registered investment advisor, I just always try to be very clear with people to understand the difference between Bitcoin and every other project. And so I mostly just restrict myself to talking about Bitcoin because everything else is a bit of a wild card until the SEC gives us some clarity on how they're going to look at it.
Yes, and speaking on working with people, could you shed some light or success stories that you've seen working at PM Squared Financial, kind of integrating this Bitcoin mining with stranded energy? Like, has there been any clients that you can speak on, of course, that have had some really good success stories kind of working with you so far?
Well, we've been really proud of some of the projects that we've put together. And again, when we're talking about private equity, it's restricted to accredited investors. And so the SEC wants to know that you're not taking advantage of people that maybe don't have the same net worth. And so you're putting at risk a huge percentage of their life savings. And so with the mining projects, we are working with people that already have been very wise in their investments. They've already made a lot of money and they're willing to allocate a little bit of money to this space to see what it does. And especially with the hosting investments and the energy arbitrage there, I think in times of of inflation, commodities, and energy, we're always going to need power. And so what it's done is it's given people exposure not only to Bitcoin. When they're invested in Bitcoin or anything adjacent to it, they're paying attention to it more, whereas maybe they weren't. But you're also investing in power, right? You're monetizing wasted molecules. And so I would say from our experience, just with the return that we've been able to offer some of our investors in those projects, they've come back for more. Like oftentimes we have to close the project before when there's more interest than there is space in the project. So we have found ourselves to be looking for other opportunities just to be able to meet the interest and the demand.
Yes, and I think that that demand is increasing. Like now the price is shooting up, and I'm sure that, your institution is going to start to get calls from investors that are curious to see like how can they be a part of some of these gains that are just going up, by the daily. Um, you've dedicated like a significant part of your career to Bitcoin education, of course. Are there any common misconceptions or myths about Bitcoin that you find yourself debunking often?
Especially when we're talking about Bitcoin mining, I think the narrative that they're trying to paint is that this is a waste of energy, right? With some of the proposed taxes on Bitcoin mining, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before because it's the first time that they've said, well, we just don't like your end use of energy. And so we're going to punish you because you're doing something with your energy that we disapprove of because we think it's a waste of energy. That seems to be the narrative that's being pushed in the places that they're trying to, let's say, tax the miners just for their use of energy. And so there is a place where your work and what's on my heart is just helping people understand the value of a global decentralized monetary system that people all over the world have the same access to, right? And so the whole idea of financial privilege, right? We live and we work and we make our money in the world reserve currency, and there's places all over the world that are experiencing much more intense inflation than we are. And so for them, it's much less of a stretch to understand the value of a system that has a cap supply, that doesn't have the same kind of counterparty risk because there's no middlemen. And so the more that we educate on what is the value add of Bitcoin, I think it helps assuage that misconception of, well, you're wasting energy. And along with that, this whole idea of Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. Yeah, that's actually a feature and not a bug. One, it helps with the decentralization, right? Because you've got to do the work to earn the Bitcoin. So you can't Satoshi couldn't just give it to all his friends, right? They had to use power, they had to use energy in order to create Bitcoin. That they then had the right to sell to other people. And so anybody can participate in that system no matter where you are. And the more miners that we have online, the more safe the system becomes. Because as you know, and I'm sure your viewers probably know, if you're going to hack the Bitcoin system, you're going to have to take over 51% of the network. And so there's no other way to get at it. And so the more people that are mining everywhere, the more decentralized it becomes, the more impossible it is to ever take it over in that way. So the energy is important. And also, if you just compare it to the rest, I mean, if we're talking about a global monetary system, or not even necessarily competing with national currencies, but just a reserve asset, the way that treasuries act as an asset, like just the importance of, I think wrapping up what I was just saying, the importance of that for the world and the value of that. Oh, I'm sorry. I remember now. So if you think of it in that context, well, then you can compare it with gold, or you could compare it with the current system. And if you look at the use of power, Bitcoin is much lower than, I think it's like half of what gold mining takes up over the world and half of what the banking system around the world is. And we have the added benefit of being able to use stranded resources, wasted resources for our power. So it's not even like we're pulling it from the grid to do our mining. We're using stuff that nobody else wants. So for all those reasons, I think it helps in understanding the asset as we educate just the value proposition of it.
Yes, and you know what's unique about the Bitcoin mining space, at least in my opinion? You have tons of women in the space. You have Lisa Huff, you have Natalie
She's great.
Sklemensky, you have Becca Brancher, you have yourself. And how does it feel to be in this space, being a woman and having such an open, diverse catalog of women that are joining you in this space? Like, how does that empower you?
That is such a great question. I cannot tell you how much I love being a woman in this space. There's another woman, all those women that you mentioned are amazing and friends of mine. There's another one, Krista Edmonds up in Canada, and she started this group, Access Tribe, to help women. And I had the privilege of being a part of an education seminar that she did recently, connected with women all over the world. And it's so fun because, you know, Bitcoin is so fascinating. The more that you study it, the more rabbit holes you go down. There's so many aspects to it, right? There's the human rights aspect and, banking the unbanked. And there's the power aspect of it and helping in Texas grow out our infrastructure so that we have more and more strength. And we do have these power emergencies. The Bitcoin miners shut down and there's more and more infrastructure built out to make our grid more strong. So anyway, for any woman that doesn't know about the space, all the women kind of come around and we're like, hey, take our hand. There's plenty of room to go around. It's such an exciting place to be. And yeah, so my experience has been the women that I meet, they're fascinating. They're thinking about what's going on in the world. They care deeply about, everywhere I go, whether it be women or men, these Bitcoin meetups, you can go anywhere in the world and they're fascinating conversations. And that's especially true for the women because it's like, well, what did you see that nobody else saw that got you here? So I love it. And for anybody that's actually going to be in Fort Worth in the upcoming weeks for North American Blockchain Summit, Natalie is going to be putting together another Women in Bitcoin event around that. And so just encouraging women to participate and get to know us. We love to have more women on board.
Yeah, Natalie Sklemensky is like one of my favorite people in this space. Like, she is so
So smart.
intelligent. Like, every time I talk to her, I just get so flummoxed and confused. And it's like I learn things from her so much. So I actually interviewed her for my show, and her episode will come out later. But we had a really insightful conversation, and I think that now, Kristine, you have been added to that legacy. So I'm I'm
Modern.
I'm grateful and honored to have the conversation. This is the last question for you.
Okay.
So, looking into the future, where do you see the biggest innovations or shifts happening in the realm of Bitcoin mining, especially with the integration of alternative energy sources like stranded natural gas?
Well, I think there's so much market out there. So there is enough stranded gas to power the Bitcoin network 7 times over. So I think that story is going to be continue to be being told. I know that I have had conversations with oil people, power people. They're all looking at it. They're just not talking about it. Right? So they're doing it behind the scene, but I think more and more it's going to be known about. I do think there might be an interesting play. There's a lot of, fear, uncertainty, a doubt narrative around Bitcoin mining. Ooh, mining bad. But it's funny because with AI, everyone's like, ooh, interesting, good, right? And so a lot of the fundamentals are the same with that. And so is there a play? AI has different specifications that are needed if you're going to do it. One of it is you can't lose power ever, because then people's projects will go down. Whereas Bitcoin mining, you could turn it off, you could turn it on, it doesn't harm the product. So is there a possibility of, let's say, co-locating the two? so that people can choose, and maybe they're a little afraid of the Bitcoin space at first, but maybe, they're really interested in getting involved in AI. And so joining them together, and you could do part this, part that, or one or the other. I think things like that will help expand and tell our story, and so that we can, as Lisa Huff always likes to say, no wasted molecule, right? So that we can go out there and capitalize on all this thrown away energy for the network, but also for human flourishing, right? Because wealthy societies are founded on cheap energy, and I think that the cheap energy we're losing our grasp on. I'm worried that the price could continue to go up and up. But with solutions like Bitcoin mining going out there and monetizing some of that energy, you're basically turning it into digital gold by turning it into Bitcoin. You're broadening the power supply out there and hopefully passing back the benefits to society.
Awesome. Kristine Cranley, I really appreciate this conversation. It's really interesting to hear that Texas accent. You've only been there a few years, and I can hear it like kicking in there a little bit. I love it. So, once again, thank you for being on the Bitcoin Source. If you have any social media handles or last words that you want to give people, feel free to do so.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, just my name, Kristine Cranley, and hope to see you there.
Yes, once again, Kristine, thank you. Hopefully, we'll have you on again. Thank you for being on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.
My pleasure. Thank you.